The suitcase hit the front porch before I did. She had packed it herself, or had someone pack it, which was more likely, because Vivienne did not personally perform tasks that could be delegated. It sat on the top step of the house I had grown up in, a single hard-shell carry-on containing what she had decided were the relevant artifacts of my presence, and Vivienne stood in the open doorway behind it with the specific composure of a woman who had been planning this moment, and was satisfied with how it was landing. "You are not welcome in this house," she said. "You have never been welcome in this house. And I want you to understand, clearly and permanently, that when you walk down those steps today, you do not come back. Not for Christmas. Not for your father's birthday. Not for any occasion I am present at, which is every occasion, because this is my home and I decide who enters it." She paused. "Leave," she said, "and never return. My father was not home. He was at a conference in Denver. A 3-day cardiology conference that Vivienne had known about for 6 weeks and that I now understood she had chosen as her window, with the deliberate timing of a woman who does not perform her most significant moves in front of witnesses who might complicate them. My name is Clara Shen. I am 33 years old, and the morning Vivienne told me to leave and never return, I had owned the building her architecture firm occupied for the past 22 months. My father married Vivienne when I was 20. I was in my second year of a finance degree when it happened, present enough to attend the ceremony, absent enough that the transition into her version of the household had been substantially complete by the time I spent any significant time inside it. Vivienne was 44, a partner at a mid-sized architecture firm, and possessed of the particular organized certainty of a woman who has built her professional life around understanding exactly how spaces should be arranged, and has extended that philosophy seamlessly and without apparent awareness of the extension to the people within them. I did not fit her arrangement. My mother had been Chinese American, a woman my father had loved deeply and lost to cancer when I was 14, and whose presence in the house Vivienne had, over the years of her tenure, subtracted with the systematic efficiency she applied to design problems. Not cruelly, never overtly, simply edited out. Photographs relocated to storage. The kitchen reorganized around Vivienne's preferences. The particular atmosphere of a household redone from the ground up in Vivienne's aesthetic, which was clean and minimal, and did not contain much room for anything that had preceded her. I had watched this process and said nothing, because saying something would have cost my father something he couldn't afford to lose, and because I had understood, at 20, that the most effective thing I could do was build my own life quickly enough that Vivienne's arrangement of someone else's house became irrelevant. I had spent 13 years doing exactly that. The trigger for this particular morning was not dramatic in its origin. I had come home for what I had believed was a routine visit. My father had asked me to come, had mentioned the conference afterward as an aside, had not told me Vivienne had objections to the visit that she had evidently been accumulating across the past several months. The objections, it turned out, had a shape. I was too present in my father's life. I called too often. My visits disrupted the rhythm of the household. My relationship with my father was, in Vivienne's estimation, something that occurred at her expense, and that she had decided, after 13 years of managed tolerance, she was no longer willing to subsidize. She had delivered this assessment over breakfast, with the architectural precision of someone who had designed the conversation structure in advance and was executing it. I had listened. I had not cried. I had not argued. I had stood up from the table, thanked her for the coffee, and walked toward the front door. That was when she told someone to bring my suitcase. That was when she told me to leave and never return. What Vivienne did not know about me could fill the gap between what she had decided I was and what I had actually become. The gap was significant. Shen Capital Partners had been operating for 6 years. I had founded it at 27 with the specific focus of someone who had spent 4 years in investment banking, watching the commercial real estate sector from close enough proximity to understand precisely where its inefficiencies lived. We were not a large firm, 16 people, disciplined portfolio, a reputation in the commercial property sector for acquisitions that other investors considered too complicated and that we considered interesting. Our portfolio currently included 14 properties across 4 cities. The 14th acquisition had been completed 22 months ago. It was a 6-story commercial building in the Midtown South District of the city where my father and Vivienne lived. A building that had been underperforming under its previous ownership due to a tenant mix problem I had identified during due diligence and resolved within 8 months of acquisition through a combination of lease restructuring and one strategic new-to-note tenant relationship. The building was now fully occupied. Among its tenants on the 3rd floor was an architecture firm that had relocated there 14 months ago when their previous lease had expired, and whose principal partner had apparently found the location, the amenity package, and the lease terms sufficiently attractive to sign a 3-year agreement. The firm was called Hartwell and Associates Architecture. Vivienne was a partner. She had signed the lease. Her name was on the tenant agreement that lived in our property management files. My name, Clara Shen, through the holding entity that owned the building, was on the ownership documents. I had known since the day Hartwell and Associates signed. My property manager had flagged it. A brief note, professional and precise. Hartwell and Associates partner roster includes Vivienne Shen, listed spousal connection to principal. I had read it. I had confirmed the connection. I had done nothing with it because it was a real estate transaction, and real estate transactions are not resolved through family dynamics, and because I was not in the business of using what I had built as a mechanism for managing relationships that had nothing to do with the building. That had been the position for 22 months. Vivienne's suitcase on the front porch revised the position. I drove to my hotel. I had stopped staying in the house 3 visits ago, a decision Vivienne had not known I had made for reasons that had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with preferring a space where I could work without managing anyone's comfort. I sat in my room for 2 hours, not in distress, or not only in distress. In the specific deliberate stillness I used when I needed to think clearly about something rather than react to it. At the end of 2 hours, I had arrived at the same place I always arrived when I gave a problem sufficient space. Clarity. I called my property manager, a thorough and unflappable man named Derek, who had been with Shen Capital for 4 years. The Midtown South building, I said. The Hartwell and Associates file. I need you to pull the lease renewal timeline. Derek pulled it. Hartwell's 3-year lease had 14 months remaining. And the renewal conversation? I said. Have they initiated anything? They sent a preliminary inquiry 2 weeks ago, Derek said, asking about our intentions for the space and whether we'd be open to a 5-year renewal. And our response? We acknowledged receipt, Derek said. Nothing further. I want to schedule a formal lease review, I said. I'll handle the Hartwell conversation personally. A brief pause. Derek was professional enough not to ask questions about decisions I had clearly already made. I'll set it up, he said. When? End of the week, I said. I called my father on Thursday. He was back from Denver. He answered with the warm distraction of a man who had been traveling and was still partially elsewhere. Clara. His voice settling into focus as it always did when he heard my voice. The particular attention that fathers develop for the sound of their children regardless of age or circumstance. Dad, I said, I need to tell you something about Monday. A pause. I spoke to Vivienne, he said carefully. What did she tell you? That you had a disagreement, he said. That you left. She packed a suitcase and told me to leave and never return, I said, in those words, while you were in Denver. The silence that followed was not my father processing the information. He was a perceptive man. The silence was my father sitting with something he had been aware of for some time and had not yet decided what to do with. Clara, I'm not calling for an apology, I said. I know you didn't know. I'm calling to tell you something you should be aware of from me rather than from someone else. What? I own Vivienne's office building, I said. Shen Capital acquired it 22 months ago. Hartwell and Associates has been our tenant for 14 months. The silence this time was different. Her firm, he said slowly, is our tenant. Yes, you own the building she works in. The building her firm leases space in. Yes, and you didn't. It's a property in our portfolio, I said. I don't discuss portfolio specifics with family. That's the same standard I apply in every direction. A long pause. What are you going to do? He said. I'm going to handle the lease renewal, professionally, I said. Whatever terms are appropriate for the market and for the building will be the terms I offer. I'm not going to use a real estate transaction to manage a family situation. He was quiet. But I want you to understand, I said, that I have spent 13 years building something real while Vivienne decided what I was. And what I was, according to the conversation she had on Monday, is someone who is not welcome in a house where my mother's memory has been packed into storage and my father has to ask for permission to have his daughter visit. I paused. I want you to understand both of those things at the same time. My father was quiet for a very long time. I've let things go on that I should have addressed, he said. Yes, I said. The suitcase, he said. She had someone pack your suitcase. Yes, I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't, I said. I also know that some of what she did, she learned she could do, because there were no consequences for it. That's not an accusation, it's just the truth. He said nothing for a moment. What do you need from me? He said finally. I thought about this honestly. I need you to turn around, I said, the way you should have turned around a long time ago. A silence that had the quality of a man making a decision he had been not making for years. Okay, he said, I'm turning around. The lease review meeting with Hartwell and Associates was scheduled for the following Friday. I conducted it personally. I had informed Derek that I would be taking the meeting myself. An unusual choice, since our standard practice was for the property management team to handle tenant relations and for me to be involved only in acquisition decisions and strategic portfolio reviews. Derek had noted this without comment and arranged the meeting accordingly. Vivienne did not know who she was meeting with until she walked into the conference room. I want to be precise about the moment because precision matters. I was not waiting behind the door to execute a performance. I was sitting at the conference table with the lease file and the renewal proposal in front of me when she entered with Hartwell's managing partner, a man named Glenn, who had handled all our previous tenant communications. She stopped in the doorway. Glenn, who had not been told the names of the parties across the table, looked between us with the expression of someone detecting a temperature he hadn't dressed for. Miss Shen, I said, addressing Vivienne directly, not unkindly, with the same professional register I used in every lease review meeting. Please sit down. She sat. The meeting took 45 minutes. I presented the renewal terms, market rate, fair, structured with the same framework we applied to every tenant relationship in the portfolio. I answered Glenn's questions about the building's planned capital improvements. I outlined the amenity package for the renewal period. At no point did I reference Monday. At no point did I acknowledge professionally, that the woman across the table had packed a suitcase and told me to leave and never return. I presented the lease. I reviewed the terms. I thanked them for their continued tenancy. At the end of the meeting, as Glenn was gathering his papers, Vivienne looked at me across the table with an expression I had not seen from her in 13 years of being her stepchild. It was not the composed authority, not the designed certainty. It was something more exposed. Something that had encountered a reality it had not accounted for in its planning. "How long?" she said. 22 months, I said. She looked at the lease file on the table. "You were going to tell me," she said, not a question, more like a sentence she was testing for its structural integrity. "I wasn't going to tell you," I said. "It's a property transaction. It's not personal." I paused. "What I am going to tell you is what I told my father. I have spent 13 years building something real. The building you work in is one part of that. My father is another part, and I am not willing to continue to exist in your arrangement of his life as something that comes and goes only when you've decided it's convenient." She was quiet. Glenn had very professionally left the room. "I said things on Monday that..." She stopped. "That you meant," I said. "At the time." She looked at the table. "My mother's photographs are in your storage unit," I said. "I'd like them returned to my father's house." A silence. "That's a reasonable request," she said finally. "Yes," I said. "It is." The photographs came back 3 weeks later. Not all of them. Some had been stored too long in conditions that had not been ideal, and were not in a state my father would have wanted to see them in. But the ones that mattered came back. The one from their wedding. The one from the year before she got sick. The summer we had rented a house on the coast, and my mother had stood at the water's edge in a yellow dress, with her hair coming loose from whatever she'd tried to pin it with. My father hung them in the hallway. Vivienne did not comment on them. This was, I understood, as close to an acknowledgement as Vivienne's architecture allowed. What she did instead was begin, over the months that followed, a process of very gradual adjustment. Not transformation. I am not going to describe a transformation, because none occurred. What occurred was a slow, imperfect recalibration. She stopped managing my access to my father through the logistics of household scheduling. She stopped editing our phone calls through the ambient pressure of her presence when I called. She began, occasionally, to ask me direct questions about my work, in the tone of someone who had decided that understanding a thing was more useful than categorizing it. She never said the word sorry. That is the truth, and it belongs in the story. But she renewed the lease, 5 years. The terms I had offered, she signed it herself. And when she walked past my father's hallway and the photograph of my mother in the yellow dress, she walked past it with the specific quiet of a woman who had decided that some things were allowed to exist alongside her arrangement, after all. It was not everything. It was more than Monday. Before you go, I need your honest answer in the comments. Do you think Clara was right to keep the building ownership quiet for 22 months? Or should she have told her father the moment she discovered the connection? Some people say silence was strategic. Others say it was too much to carry alone. Where do you stand? Tell me right now. I read every single comment. If this story moves something in you, if you have ever built something real while someone in your own family refused to see it, hit that like button so this story finds the people who need to hear it. Share it with someone who has a step-parent, a difficult family member, someone who has drawn a line around a life that never included them. And if you believe that the most powerful thing you can own is something the people who dismissed you don't know about, subscribe, because every week this channel tells the stories of women who were told to leave and built empires on the way out the door. Your first month of Audible is completely free. Over 500 Zero Zadon titles waiting in the description below. For the builders, the ones who left and came back on their own terms, the link is right there. Use it.